Stories at Work.
Hi, this is Stories at Work. Today we're breaking down a dramatized and fictional workplace case about a single dad who got pushed out for restructuring. The hallway smelled like burnt espresso and printer toner, the kind of scent you stop noticing until your life gets split in two right under it. My director, Soren Vance, didn't ask me to sit. He didn't even close the little glass meeting room door all the way. That was the first sign he wanted this to feel temporary, clean, forgettable. Darian, he said, using my name the way people use a seatbelt. We're making some structural adjustments. I was still holding my phone because I'd been checking the time. Milo's school dismissed at 3, and my calendar had a bright block that said pickup like it was sacred. Because it was. Single dad schedules don't bend. They snap. Adjustments? I repeated. Soren nodded like we were negotiating the weather. Role consolidation, overlap, efficiency. Then he slid a thin folder across the table. Severance, release, the usual. He kept his voice low, almost gentle. It's not performance, he added quickly. We're grateful. This is just direction. I didn't open the folder right away. I looked at his hands instead. No tremor, no guilt. The calm of someone who already practiced this speech in his car. What happens to my accounts? I asked. My access, my email, my work devices. Soren's eyes flicked toward the half-closed door and back. IT will handle the transition. That sounded rehearsed too. I finally opened the folder. Most of it was boilerplate, a payout, continuation terms, a line about returning equipment. But one sentence stopped me because it didn't match the soft tone he'd been using. Signature required today. System access ends by lunch. I looked up. Why the rush? Soren gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Standard. Risk policy. You understand. I did understand. I'd built half of their internal controls. I was the guy who wrote the policies they now use like a weapon. But understanding doesn't make it less personal when you're the one being shoved out. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, slow, like my therapist taught me after the divorce. Can I take it home and review? I asked. Have counsel look at it? Soren's expression tightened for a second. The first crack. We really need it back today. The way he said need was wrong. Not HR wrong, not legal wrong. Urgent in a way that didn't belong to a normal layoff. Behind Soren, through the glass, I could see people walking past. Laughing. A normal Tuesday. Nobody knew my world was collapsing in a room with the door cracked open. I did the math automatically. If I walked out without signing, I'd be marked non-cooperative. That could delay payout, delay benefits, delay everything. And Milo had an appointment coming up. The kind you don't postpone. So I signed. Not because I trusted them, because I trusted my responsibility to my son more than my pride. Soren exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. He took the folder back a little too fast. Thank you, he said. We'll keep it respectful. Respectful. Like erasing someone quietly was a kindness. He stood and offered his hand. I shook it because that's what you do when you're trying not to panic in a glass box. Then he said the part that felt like an afterthought, but landed like a weight. Also, you'll need to return any company documents. No copies. No archives. Nothing stored outside approved systems. I blinked. I don't keep anything outside approved systems. I'm sure, he said quickly. It's just, we're being thorough. I walked out with my badge still on my chest, still active, still green, and I felt this surreal thing, like I'd been cut loose from a ship but was still standing on the deck. At my desk, my teammate Kira Lott looked up. You okay? You look pale. I'm fine, I lied. Just meeting. She studied me. That wasn't a normal meeting. I forced a small smile. I'll call you later. I started packing the way you pack when you're trying to stay invisible. Laptop, charger, Milo's, drawing I'd taped inside my drawer. A crooked stick figure of me with the words, "My dad fixes computers," in big, uneven letters. As I slid it into my bag, my screen blinked once and kicked me out of my email, then Slack, then the VPN. My badge was still green, but my digital life was already dead. A notification popped up on my phone from the equity portal. Not unusual, except I hadn't gotten one in months. Action required. Plan update available. I frowned. The equity portal was the thing people joked about during good times and forgot during bad times. Mine was mostly background noise, a leftover from the early days when the company was tiny and we all got promises instead of raises. Back then, I'd taken a lower salary because I needed stability and believed in the product. They gave me a small options grant and said, someday it could be meaningful. I signed the paperwork, filed it away, and then life happened. Daycare costs, medical bills, a mortgage that didn't care about someday. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. But now, standing at my desk, with my access vanishing in real time, that notification felt like a tap on the shoulder from the past. I opened the portal. It asked me to log in again. My password failed. I tried the backup method. Access denied. I stared at the screen until my eyes stung. They didn't just cut off my work tools. They cut off the one place that held the record of what I owned. Kira's chair rolled closer, quiet. Darian, what's going on? I swallowed. They're letting me go. Her face shifted from shock to anger so fast it almost made me flinch. What? Why? Restructure, I said, tasting the lie. Effective immediately. Kira glanced toward the glass offices down the hall. Soren did this? I didn't answer because my phone buzzed again. A text from Lena Harrow in HR. Reminder, please drop your badge with security before exit. Also confirm you have no retained company records, including personal backups. My thumb hovered over the screen. No retained records. No personal backups. It was phrased like policy, but it read like fear. I looked at my bag, at Milo's drawing, at the little cracked corner of my laptop sticker that still said, Founding Year Crew from the old days. And suddenly a memory snapped into place. An email thread from years ago when a lawyer had explained a conversion, a grant, something about holding through a trust structure because early employees were being rolled into a new class before a major financing. I hadn't understood it then. I'd just signed where they told me to sign. Because I trusted them. Because I was busy trying to survive. Now, for the first time, I wondered if that ignorance wasn't accidental, if it was useful. I slid my phone into my pocket and zipped my bag shut. Then I did something I didn't even fully decide to do. I walked past the elevators and headed toward the stairwell instead. Because if they were this desperate to lock me out by lunch, it meant something was moving behind the scenes, faster than I'd been told. And whatever it was, my name was in it. But that was just the beginning. I took the stairs like I was sneaking out of my own life. Not because I wanted drama, because the elevators had cameras, and the lobby had security, and HR had already sent that message like I was a risk instead of an employee who'd spent years building their controls. The stairwell door shut behind me with that heavy sealed sound, and for a second I just stood there, listening to my own breathing and the distant hum of the building. My hands were shaking, but my brain was doing what it always did under pressure. Inventory, pattern, motive. They didn't just lay me off. They rushed me. They cut me off by lunch, and they were oddly obsessed with no copies and no archives, like I'd been carrying state secrets in my backpack next to my kid's drawing. I pulled out my phone and searched my personal email for old onboarding stuff. Anything that wasn't stored on company systems. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for context. The equity portal notification was still there, taunting me, but my login was dead. SSO had been pulled like a plug. I typed one phrase that I knew had to exist somewhere. Equity grant. A thread popped up from years ago, back when the company was scrappy, when people wore hoodies to client meetings and the founders still answered support tickets. I'd forgotten how hopeful my old emails sounded. There was a PDF attached. Grant agreement. Darian Cole. My throat tightened. I opened it right there on the concrete landing, thumb scrolling. Most of it was legal language, but some numbers jumped out even through the blur in my eyes. The grant size wasn't small. It wasn't token. It was substantial. And then I saw a line I'd never paid attention to because I didn't know how to read it at the time. Post-split equivalent, shares subject to adjustments. Split, equivalent, adjustments. I stared at those words until the meaning started to form, slow and sharp. The company had done at least one split since my early days. I'd remembered it as a headline and a congratulatory Slack message. Nothing that touched my rent, my grocery bill, my child support paperwork. But splits don't change value. They change count. My phone buzzed again. Another HR message. Lena Harrow. IT reports multiple unauthorized login attempts on restricted systems. Please stop immediately. Continued activity may be treated as cause. Cause. That word was a knife wrapped in policy. Because cause didn't just threaten my payout. It threatened my benefits. It threatened my reputation. And if my gut was right, it threatened something else too. Something tied to that equity document sitting open on my screen. I typed back with one sentence, calm on purpose. I attempted to access my employee equity portal to review my personal grant. I have not accessed restricted systems. No emotion, no pleading, just a record. Then I called the number at the bottom of the PDF, the Equity Plan Administrator. I didn't even know if it was still valid. It rang twice before a recorded menu picked up. Thank you for calling. I pressed options until I reached a human. A woman answered with a practiced, tired voice. Equity Services. This is Maris. How can I help? My name is Darian Cole, I said. I'm trying to access my account, but my login was disabled today. I'm no longer able to authenticate through my company email. There was a pause as she pulled something up. Keyboard clicks. Then, I can see your profile, Maris said carefully, but I cannot discuss balances until we complete identity verification. Fine, I said. Tell me what you need. She asked security questions that made my stomach twist, the kind that remind you how much of your life is stored in databases, old addresses, the last 4 digits of a number I hadn't said out loud in years, the name of my first manager. I answered them all, steady, because now the fear was turning into focus. Another pause. Thank you, Maris said. I'm in. I held my breath. Then she said, your account has a restriction note. A restriction? My voice came out lower than I expected. Yes, it was placed this morning. Employer initiated. It states, employee terminated. Access suspended. Communications routed through counsel. My hand tightened around the phone. That's not standard. I can't speak to standard, she replied, still careful. But I can tell you, the note is unusual for a routine separation. Is there an event? I asked. A tender offer, a secondary, anything pending. Silence for half a beat. Not because she didn't hear me, but because she was deciding how much she was allowed to say. There is a corporate action window, Maris said. Yes. My pulse hit my ears. And my holdings? I asked. What do I have? I can provide a summary, she said, but given the restriction note, I need to be cautious. I can tell you the following. You have vested instruments and fully issued shares held in custody under a plan structure. Your total estimated value at the last internal price is... She stopped, as if she'd read the number and didn't like what it did to the air. Say it, I whispered. Approximately, Maris said, $200 million. For a second, the stairwell didn't exist. The building didn't exist. My layoff didn't exist. There was only that number hovering like something I didn't deserve to hear, because my checking account was never even close to calm. 200 million. I swallowed hard. That can't be right. It is a valuation-based estimate, she corrected, not liquid cash. But yes, the magnitude is correct based on the last board-approved price. Board approved. My skin went cold. That was the first time the word board connected to my body, like electricity. Because if the board was approving prices and there was a corporate action window, and my access was restricted this morning, then my termination wasn't about overlap at all. It was timing. It was control. It was someone trying to move me out of the room before the board looked at the cap table closely enough to notice the name they didn't want to explain. Maris kept talking, listing next steps, paperwork, identity documents, escalation to their legal liaison. But my mind had already shifted. I wasn't panicking anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was angry in a clean, focused way. Because my son's pickup time was still coming. My badge was still green, and they had just tried to label me cause for attempting to see what I owned. I ended the call politely, like I hadn't just been hit by a truck made of numbers. Then I opened the PDF again and scrolled slower, forcing myself to read the parts I'd ignored for years. And there it was, a clause about dispute resolution and board notice, buried in plain sight, like a lever waiting for a hand. I realized something then, standing alone in that stairwell with concrete under my shoes. They didn't fire me because I was expendable. They fired me because I wasn't. That was the moment I stopped feeling like a man being pushed out and started feeling like a problem they couldn't bury. And then, silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. By the time I walked back out of the stairwell, my hands had stopped shaking. Not because I felt safe, because my brain had gone cold. The office looked the same gray carpet, the same glass rooms, the same people pretending the day was normal. But I wasn't seeing it like an employee anymore. I was seeing it like an auditor sees the system after the breach. Who has access, who benefits, who's lying about standard. Kira was still at her desk, eyes tracking me like she'd been waiting for something to drop. "You were gone a while," she said quietly. "I needed air," I replied. Not a lie, just incomplete. I sat down, opened my laptop out of habit, and watched it reject me again. No email, no VPN, no internal drive. Dead. But I didn't need internal systems for what I was doing now. I needed two things, a timeline and proof. Because if this became a fight, and it already was, nobody would care about how shocked I felt in that hallway. They would care about dates, messages, policy language, and who initiated what. So I started building a record the only way I still could, on my phone, in a plain note, with timestamps. Soren meeting, late morning. Severance demand, signed today access cut. Before lunch, HR threat, treated as cause. Equity portal, restriction. Employer initiated, placed, this morning. Corporate action window, confirmed by plan administrator, I didn't write feelings. I wrote facts. Then I did something I'd never done before. I called my ex-wife. Tessa answered on the second ring, already irritated, like she'd been bracing for me to ask a favor. "What?" she said. "I need you to listen," I replied. "I'm not calling to fight." That made her pause. "I got laid off today," I said, "and I just found out I have equity worth. A lot. Enough that lawyers will care. I'm asking you one thing. If anything happens to my health coverage or custody schedule, I need it documented that I'm handling it responsibly." Silence. Then her tone shifted, not warm but sharper, alert. "How much is a lot?" she asked. I hesitated. Saying it out loud felt dangerous, like it would summon someone. 200 million valuation-based, I said. Not cash, but enough that they tried to lock me out of the portal this morning. Tessa inhaled slowly. "Darian, are you sure?" "I'm sure enough to stop guessing," I replied. "I'm getting counsel. If anyone contacts you, if anyone asks questions about me, you tell me. Immediately." Another pause. "Okay," she said finally. "I will." We ended the call without the usual tension. That was how I knew this was serious. Then I texted my sister Rowan, because she's the kind of person who reads contracts for fun and never forgets a detail. "Need a referral for an employment attorney?" "Today," she replied in less than a minute. I'm calling you in too. Don't sign anything else. I stared at that message longer than I needed to, because the truth was I had already signed. And that thought hit me like a delayed bruise. I signed their severance. I signed their release. I signed whatever they slid in front of me while I was thinking about Milo's appointment, and the fact that my kid needed me more than my pride did. I felt sick again, not with panic this time, with recognition. Because if they were trying to push me out before a board event, they didn't want my work. They wanted my silence. Kira leaned closer. Darian, did you do something? Did they accuse you of anything? I looked at her face. Genuine worry. Anger held back. Kira wasn't political. She didn't do office games. She was the type who stayed late to fix a customer issue because she couldn't sleep otherwise. No, I said, but they're about to. Kira's jaw tightened. Soren's been acting weird all week, like he's hiding something. Tell me, I said immediately. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. He's been meeting with legal, not normal legal. Outside counsel. And yesterday I saw Caldwell in the building. Caldwell? I asked. Kira nodded. The board liaison. The guy who only shows up when something big is happening. My throat went dry, because Maris had said corporate action window. And Kira had just confirmed the kind of person who appears when companies are about to move money and paper. And then my phone buzzed again, an email to my personal account from Lena in HR. The subject line was bland, almost polite. Separation follow-up, compliance attestation. I opened it. It was a form, a digital attestation. It asked me to confirm that I had not retained any company property, any confidential information, any documentation, any copies, any materials, any notes, the kind of sweeping language that makes normal people sign because they're exhausted and want it to end. But near the bottom was a clause that made my stomach drop. Employee affirms no claim to any additional compensation, equity, or consideration beyond severance as provided. My thumb froze. That wasn't about laptops. That was about my stake. They wanted me to sign away my right to even question what I owned, after cutting off my access to see it. And they were doing it fast, while I was still raw and disoriented. I forwarded the email to Rowan with one line. They're trying to make me disclaim equity. Then I put my phone down and just stared at the office for a second, because it finally clicked. This wasn't a layoff. It was a cap table cleanup. Someone had looked at the ownership structure, seen my name, and decided a single dad with a normal paycheck would be easier to erase than to negotiate with, especially if they wrapped it in HR language and rushed me before I could understand. And the worst part? If I hadn't gotten that portal notification at the exact wrong time, I would have walked out believing I was just another disposable employee. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Unknown. Again. My chest tightened. I looked toward the glass offices down the hall. Soren's door was closed now, too closed, like he was waiting. I answered on the fourth ring, voice flat. Hello? A man spoke, calm and professional, like he was selling me a service. Darian Cole, this is Miles Brackett with Harrow and Vance Legal. We represent the company. We'd like to schedule a brief call to clarify some items regarding your separation. I felt my spine go rigid, because he didn't say HR, he said legal, and he called within an hour of me receiving that attestation. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I just asked one question. Are you calling about my equity? There was a pause so small most people would miss it, but I didn't. He recovered fast. We're calling to ensure everything is handled smoothly. I held the phone tighter. Send it in writing, I said, and include the specific clause you want me to sign. Another pause, then polite again. Of course, we'll email it. I ended the call. And I realized, sitting there with my dead laptop and my son's drawing in my bag, that the version of me who signed quickly in that glass room was gone. Because now I knew what they were doing, and I knew why. That night, I stopped being the guy who tried to keep peace. I became the guy who kept records. Rowan called me back while I was still sitting at my desk, staring at a dead login screen like it had personally betrayed me. "Do not sign that attestation," she said. "No hello, no warm-up. Forward me everything, severance, HR email, any texts. And you need an employment attorney who's handled equity disputes, not just layoffs." "I already signed the severance," I said. A beat. Then her voice softened, but only slightly. "Okay. Then we work with what you didn't sign, and we stop them from getting you to waive what matters." My phone buzzed again. An email from that lawyer, Miles Brackett. Polished subject line, polite tone. Attached PDF. Separation confirmation and final release. I opened it and scrolled straight to the section I'd seen in HR's attestation. There it was again, dressed up in longer words. A waiver of any and all claims tied to equity, consideration, future participation, disputes, everything. And then near the bottom, a sentence that was almost insulting in its simplicity. Employee acknowledges no further ownership interest in the company. I stared at it until the anger stopped feeling like heat and started feeling like direction. Kira appeared at the edge of my desk, eyes wide. "Security is asking for you," she whispered. "They're at reception." Of course they were. They didn't want a quiet exit anymore. They wanted a controlled exit. I stood, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked to the lobby like I belonged there. Like I wasn't about to be turned into a cautionary tale. 2 security guards stood near the desk, hands folded, polite faces. The older one said my name carefully. "Mr. Cole?" "We need your badge." I unclipped it and placed it in his palm. He nodded. "Thank you. And we'll need you to sign the property return form." He held out a tablet. I didn't take it. "I returned all property," I said. "Email the form to my personal address. I'll respond through counsel." His smile thinned. "It's standard." "I understand," I said. "Email it." The younger guard shifted his stance. Not aggressive, just ready. Like they were trained to escalate if I made it emotional. I didn't. I turned and walked out. Outside, the winter air hit my lungs like cold water. I sat in my car, put both hands on the steering wheel, and forced myself to think in sequence. They had tried 3 moves in one day. Severance rush. Access cutoff. Equity waiver. That wasn't cleanup. That was containment. My phone buzzed again. Rowan. "I found the clause. They can't just cancel issued shares without board action. We need the plan documents and the cap table excerpt. Also, you should notify the plan administrator in writing that you dispute the restriction." I typed back, "Already talked to them. They confirmed corporate action window." Rowan replied, "Good. That means timing matters. We act today." I called Maris again. This time I didn't ask for value. I asked for process. "I need you to log a formal dispute," I said. "Employer placed a restriction today. I contest it. I need written confirmation of what was changed, when, and by whom." Maris paused. Then her voice went more procedural. "We can open a case. We can also send a notice to the employer's equity counsel." "Do it," I said, "and copy me on all correspondence." "Understood," she replied. "You'll receive a case number." When the email came in, I forwarded it to Rowan and the attorney she'd referred, a partner named Sable Kincaid, who picked up my call herself, which told me everything about how much this mattered. "Darian," she said, calm but sharp, "I read what you sent. They're trying to pressure you into a global waiver while you're disoriented and locked out. We're going to slow the game down." "How?" I asked. 2 tracks, Sable said. Employment track. Improper coercion, benefits, retaliation threats. Equity track. Notify the plan administrator and demand preservation of records. Also, we put the board on notice if there's a corporate action window. I swallowed. "Can we even reach the board?" "We can reach the right person," she said, "especially if your name is on issued shares. Boards don't like surprises, and they hate undisclosed disputes during a corporate action." That word again, corporate action. I felt the panic trying to crawl back in, and I shoved it down. Do it, I said. Sable didn't waste time. She drafted a notice while I sat in my car and answered questions like I was giving a deposition, exact time of Soren's meeting, exact wording, HR's cause threat, the moment my access died, the attestation clause, the outside counsel call, facts, timeline, pattern. Then she said, one more thing. Do you have any earlier equity documents outside company systems? I have a grant PDF in my personal email, I said. Forward it, she replied, and do not contact anyone inside the company except to request everything in writing. No hallway conversations, no emotional texts. Everything becomes evidence. I did exactly that. At 3 o'clock, I picked up Milo from school like my life hadn't exploded. He ran to the car with his backpack bouncing, talking about a math quiz and a kid who traded him a dinosaur sticker. I smiled, nodded, kept my voice normal. But inside, my head was still in that glass room with the door half closed. After dinner, after homework, after Milo fell asleep clutching his blanket, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open to my personal email, watching new messages arrive like incoming weather. One from Maris. Case opened, restriction disputed, employer counsel notified. One from Sable. Draft notice for the company and equity counsel, plus a separate notice addressed to the board's audit chair through the corporate secretary. Then my phone rang again. Unknown number, same as before. I let it ring out. A voicemail came in, Miles Brackett's voice, smooth as varnish. Darian, we'd like to resolve this amicably. The release is routine. The company is prepared to offer a modest additional consideration if you sign by end of day. Modest. I almost laughed. They'd just acknowledged, without meaning to, that the routine form wasn't routine at all, because routine doesn't come with extra money and a deadline. Sable told me not to respond directly, so I didn't. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail transcription to her. She replied with one line, "Good. That's pressure. We document it." At 9 that night, Sable sent the notices. Certified email, formal language, no accusations, just questions that demanded answers. Why was access cut before standard offboarding? Why was an equity waiver included in a separation attestation? Why was a plan restriction placed the same morning? Confirm preservation of records related to my grants, holdings, restrictions, and any corporate action window materials. And she copied the corporate secretary, which meant the board's orbit would feel it. I didn't know it yet, but that email would cost them everything. The next morning, my phone lit up before sunrise. Not one call, a string of them, different numbers, same cadence. I opened my email, a message from Lena in HR, suddenly polite in a new way. Hi, Darian. Can we schedule a call to clarify some misunderstandings? Another from Soren Vance. No subject line, just 2 sentences. Darian, I think wires got crossed yesterday. Let's talk privately. No lawyers needed. I stared at that last sentence until it felt like a confession. No lawyers needed. Because lawyers make records. Lawyers slow pressure into procedure. I didn't respond. Sable did. A formal reply, 5 lines, asking them to direct all communication through counsel and to confirm preservation. Minutes later, Maris emailed again. Employer has requested to remove restriction pending review. Pending review, that was new. That meant my dispute had landed somewhere it mattered, and then the chaos arrived in a form I didn't expect. Kira called me, voice tight. I wasn't going to call, she said, but they're panicking. I just got pulled into a meeting with legal and Soren. They asked me if you ever talked about equity. They asked if you kept copies of anything. They're asking everyone like they're searching for a leak. I closed my eyes. They weren't searching for a leak. They were searching for a narrative. Kira, I said carefully, don't get caught in the middle. If they ask you about me, just say you're focused on your work. Don't speculate. She exhaled. Darian, what did you step on? I opened my eyes and looked at the dark kitchen window. my reflection staring back like a stranger. I stepped on the part of the company they thought was buried, I said. Kira went quiet. Then she whispered, "They thought you were gone." I swallowed. "They were wrong," I said. For the first time since that hallway meeting, I felt a clean surge of relief. Not joy, not triumph. Just the knowledge that pressure had shifted. They had tried to rush me into silence. Instead, they woke up the board's immune system. The fastest way to tell a separation is dirty isn't the layoff itself. It's the speed. When someone demands your signature today, they're not protecting the company. They're protecting a window. And windows close when sunlight hits the paperwork. The first time the board entered my life, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt like a calendar invite that shouldn't have existed. Sable forwarded it to me with a single line. "Do not attend. Observe. We're letting process do its job." The invite wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Soren Vance, Lena Harrow, outside counsel, and the corporate secretary. Subject: urgent, equity dispute and record preservation. And there, buried in the attendee list like a shadow that suddenly had a face, was Caldwell, the board liaison Kira had mentioned. That was when I understood something. I wasn't fighting a manager anymore. I was forcing the company to explain itself to the only audience it couldn't charm. That morning, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Soren tried again, this time with a tone that sounded almost wounded. "Darian, you're taking this too far." Too far. Like my name being scrubbed from a cap table was a misunderstanding. Sable replied for me, one paragraph. No emotion, just boundaries. Then around midday, Maris from Equity Services emailed again. "Restriction removed. Access reinstated pending review. Please log in and verify your holding summary." My hands were steady when I opened the portal this time. I didn't feel excitement. I felt dread. The kind that comes before you confirm a truth you can't unsee. The dashboard loaded. My name was there. The holdings were there. Not a promise. Not an option that could vanish with a layoff. Issued shares held in custody under the plan structure, exactly as Maris had said. Vested instruments, a value estimate tied to the most recent internal price, $200 million. Seeing it on the screen didn't make me feel rich. It made me feel used, because the only reason I'd lived like I was disposable was because I didn't know I wasn't. Sable instructed me to take screenshots and download every statement the portal allowed. Not because we planned to leak anything, but because we needed a clean record of what existed the moment access was restored. I saved it all to an encrypted folder on my personal drive, then emailed the files to Sable the way she told me to. A few hours later, she called. "They've shifted," she said. "You can hear it in their writing now. Less confidence. More hedging." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means the board asked questions they didn't expect," she replied, "and now management is trying to control damage." That evening, a formal letter arrived from the company's outside counsel. Not friendly, not threatening. Something colder than both. They acknowledged my equity existed. They acknowledged the restriction had been placed. They claimed it was an administrative error during separation processing. And then they offered a new deal. Not modest additional consideration. A real number. A separation package rewritten to include extended benefits for Milo and me. A non-disparagement clause that cut both ways. And a commitment in writing that my equity would remain intact and unencumbered. But the part that mattered most wasn't the money. It was a single sentence Sable read out loud twice. Slowly, like it was evidence of gravity. Company agrees that employee retains all ownership interests previously granted and issued, and that no waiver of equity was validly executed. So the waiver was dead, because it had never been valid in the first place, not the way they tried to do it, not at that speed, not under threats. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at Milo's dinosaur sticker sheet while Sable explained the next steps. "Here's what's happening behind the curtain," she said. The board doesn't want a dispute during a corporate action window. They also don't want the appearance that management tried to extinguish an employee stake through coercion. That becomes a governance problem. So they're choosing the cleanest exit. Meaning? I asked. Meaning they'll settle with you, she said, and then they'll deal with whoever created this mess. The next morning proved she was right. Kira texted me first. No greeting. Lena's gone. I stared at the message. Then another one came in, and Soren walked out. Badge deactivated in front of everyone. My chest tightened, not with satisfaction, with the strange emptiness of watching consequences arrive, exactly where you predicted them. What are they saying? I typed back. Kira replied, they're calling it leadership transition. But legal is interviewing people. They're pulling emails. It's bad. I didn't respond after that. There was nothing to say that wouldn't pull Kira deeper into it. I just set my phone down and watched Milo eat cereal, like the world hadn't changed. Because for him, it hadn't. He still needed lunch packed, shoes tied, a ride to school, and for the first time in a long time, I could do those things without the quiet terror that one missed paycheck would collapse everything. A week later, Sable and I did the final call with the company, not with HR, not with Soren, but with a new interim people leader and a different outside counsel who spoke like someone trying to clean up glass without cutting themselves. They didn't apologize the way movies do. They apologized the way corporations do, by putting commitments in writing and agreeing to terms they would have fought a month ago. The settlement locked in my benefits for a full year, ensured my separation was recorded as a non-performance restructure, and included a clause preventing retaliation or blacklisting through references, and my equity confirmed, preserved, unwaived. The corporate action window still happened, but now my name was on the record exactly where it belonged. A few days after everything was signed, Tessa called me, not angry, not defensive. I heard from someone, she said. They said you didn't just get laid off. No, I replied gently. I didn't. There was a long pause. Then she said the thing that hit me harder than the valuation ever did. Milo's coverage is okay? More than okay, I said. It's secured. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Good. And in that moment, the whole story stopped being about a number. It became about what that number prevented. Panic decisions, desperate compromises, the kind of fear that makes you sign papers you don't understand because your kid needs you functional. On a quiet Friday, I picked Milo up early and took him to a park near the river. It was cold enough that the swing squeaked. He ran ahead of me laughing, and I sat on a bench with a paper cup of coffee and felt something I hadn't felt since before the divorce. Stillness, not the numb kind, the kind that comes after you stop bracing for impact. Milo climbed up beside me and leaned into my shoulder the way he did when he was tired. Are you going to go back to your office? He asked. I looked out at the water and thought about glass rooms, rush signatures, and the way Soren said standard like it was a shield. No, I said. I'm going to build something better, and I'm going to be home more. He nodded like that was all he needed, then hopped down and ran back to the swings. I stayed on the bench and let the cold air fill my lungs, because the last thing they ever understood about me was simple. I wasn't dangerous because I wanted revenge. I was dangerous because I knew how to document the truth, and I finally learned that my name mattered enough to defend it.